The podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com. For a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial, go to audibletrial.com/SYSK. That's audibletrial.com/SYSK for your free 30-day trial and free audiobook download. Today on Something You Should Know, what one thing will help improve your mental and physical health and protect you from memory loss. It's pretty simple, and you're about to find out. Plus, a strategy that can really accelerate your success. It's called being scrappy.
One of my favorite definitions comes from the Urban Dictionary, which describes a scrappy person as someone who's little but can really kick some ass. So I think I like that one the best.
And a great example of being scrappy are the Girl Scouts who decided to sell their cookies a little different than everyone else.
They actually just set up a Girl Scout cookie stand in front of a legal marijuana pot distribution center, and they moved 117 boxes in 2 hours.
Terri Sjodin, author of Scrappy, will join me today. And do you really know how to wash your hands to prevent catching or spreading illness? Amazingly, a lot of people don't. Let's find out if you're doing it right. All this today on Something You Should Know.
Something you should know. Fascinating intel, the world's top experts, and practical advice you can use in your life today.
The Something You Should Know podcast
with Mike Carruthers.
Hello, and welcome to the Something You Should Know podcast today. A very motivating program for you today. I'm going to be talking with Terri Sjodin. She is always a great guest. And she's going to be talking about the importance of being scrappy. If you want to be successful, you have to take risks, go outside the lines, and be scrappy. And I think you're going to enjoy what she has to say about how to be scrappy and what it can do for you. First today, I want to talk about one of the things that affects your mental and physical health, as well as your likelihood of getting dementia as you age. This is really interesting. Starting in 1938, researchers tracked more than 700 men and some of their spouses and children. In fact, as I recall, President Kennedy was one of the 700 people in this study. One of the biggest findings in this study was that those people who had strong relationships had the lowest risk of developing chronic physical illness, mental illness, and memory decline. And it didn't even matter if the relationships were rocky. Even couples who bickered all the time got the benefit as long as they knew that they had someone they could count on, then they were good. In fact, the biggest predictor of how healthy a person would be at 80 was how satisfied they were in their relationships at 50. So there is little doubt that good relationships are essential for good health, especially as we age. And that is something you should know. So what's the best way to get ahead and be a success? Hard work, connections, knowing the right people, good communication skills. All those things may be important, but you also have to have the right approach and the right spirit. And that is what we're going to talk about now with Terri Sjodin. Terri is the author of a new best-selling book called Scrappy, in which she talks about the importance of having that scrappy attitude. Welcome to the podcast, Terri.
Thank you for having me.
So explain what you mean by scrappy. Explain that term.
Sure. Well, I think of it as being full of fighting spirit. It's synonymous with having moxie, being feisty, enthusiastic, kind of gutsy or spunky. One of my favorite definitions comes from the Urban Dictionary, which describes a scrappy person as someone who's little but can really kick some ass. So I think I like that one the best. But when you're scrappy, you have the determination of a street fighter. You work smarter, you're willing to work harder when you need to, and you're willing to take risks and to play big no matter what the obstacles. So the word scrappy kind of embodies a mix of all of these traits, plus what I call the gumption to actually take action.
And how does that differ, do you think, from the way most people do it? I mean, it seems maybe that in business anyway, but the people are a little more methodical and slow and research and that they're not out there just trying things, because that has the image of just, you don't know what you're doing, so you're trying everything and you're talking to everybody, and that's not very strategic.
No, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, let's say you've been told time and time again that if you pay your dues and you keep plugging away, that you'll eventually be successful, and that might be true. But if you want to reach your goals faster, then it's probably time for you to get scrappy. Whether you're in sales or you're in some vastly different field, a scrappy effort actually has the potential to change or improve your circumstances and start you down a path towards your goal a little faster, because you're going to come up with a clever workaround that'll help you to save time and save your mental sanity and get you where you want to go a little quicker. I think that's really the emphasis behind what a scrappy effort can do. It creates breakthroughs where you may have been stalled, or what we say, when you're stuck in purgatory. Like, it hasn't been a no, it hasn't been a yes, you're just kind of frozen. And so getting scrappy kind of gets you out of that stuck space.
But can it also get you in trouble?
Sure, right? So my motto is always, let's keep it classy and scrappy. There are people that do things that are disruptive or confusing or kind of distract you, and maybe that distraction is intended to be able to create an opening. But if it's not a classy distraction, if it's not a positive distraction, then it actually works against you rather than for you.
So maybe an example or two would help of how somebody would do something in a scrappy way.
Okay, well, in a positive way or in a negative way? Which way would you like to go
maybe
first?
both. Maybe both would work.
Okay, so on a positive front, let me give you one of my favorite illustrations. So I was a Girl Scout, and part of the Girl Scout experience is that you participate in the annual Girl Scout cookie drive. And so our job back in the day was to try to sell 100 boxes of cookies. And people think that's really easy, but trust me, it's not easy to move 100 boxes of cookies. And again, back in my day, you'd get the order form, you'd go door to door, you'd try to encourage your neighbors to, pre-order cookies. You'd submit your form, the troop leader would then collect all of the orders, and then they would come in and you'd have to resort them on your living room floor. And then you'd have to go out and re-deliver the cookies. And sometimes people didn't want their cookies, sometimes they changed their minds, sometimes they didn't have any money and you'd have to go back. And it was just difficult. And trust me, even though I was persistent and I was consistent, it wasn't an easy feat. Now, fast forward to a couple years ago. I'm reading an article in the Los Angeles Times about a young gal named Danielle Lay, and she and her mother decided to bypass that entire ruckus. So instead of doing what I did, they actually just set up a Girl Scout cookie stand in front of a legal marijuana pot distribution center in Northern California, and they moved 117 boxes in 2 hours. And I thought to myself, now that was scrappy, right? She saved time. She didn't have to go back and deliver cookies. She didn't have to deal with people changing their minds or not having the money. And, it was really clever. It was smart. It was a workaround. And granted, I'm pretty clear that the Girl Scouts' position on this is that they don't want all the Girl Scouts to go standing in front of a marijuana pot distribution center. But I think you can get the idea and the notion on the difference between being scrappy and being persistent.
Yeah. Maybe something, an example, maybe in more of a business context of somebody who works, either as an entrepreneur or an employee who gets scrappy and doesn't do it the same old way.
Sure. So there are countless illustrations in the book of really clever ways that people have been able to capture the attention of a highly desirable prospect. One of my favorites, just as like a little trigger, you may recall in the film Wall Street, where Charlie Sheen plays the character of Bud Fox, who's trying to capture the attention of Gordon Gekko because he's a very highly desirable prospect. And so basically he does his homework, cold calls the guy for 59 days in a row, shows up on his office doorstep with Gekko's box of favorite Cuban cigars, or his favorite cigars, and delivers them on his birthday and gets the opening. So that was one scrappy, clever idea, and that was kind of like my stimulus. So I started using that similar strategy, trying to find unique ways to open a conversation or access an individual in a way that really makes it creates an opportunity or a window. So, for example, there was a gal that I was working with. She was what I would call a very high-end decision maker. couldn't really capture her attention, really couldn't kind of access her. But I wanted to really kind of go above and beyond the ordinary in order to create a relationship. So I had seen a speaker from Mattel, and he was talking about a brand new Entrepreneur Barbie that was being released. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so clever. So I bought an Entrepreneur Barbie for myself, shared it with a couple of my girlfriends. They went absolutely crazy. And so I thought, what if I shared this Entrepreneur Barbie with others? Well, I sent this, what I would call difficult prospect, a Entrepreneur Barbie, and she went absolutely crazy. And she loved it so much that gave me the opportunity to speak with her and just kind of smooth the pathway, if you will, to enter and engage in conversation. So it's just little clever things that you can do to open doors or kind of shake things up.
But as you mentioned earlier, you also don't want to annoy people either. I mean, just trying things to be different could really upset someone.
Right. You have to be really cautious about what you're going to do and how you're going to execute. There is a terrible blunder about, and again, there's a difference between being scrappy and clever and doing something that's just absolutely crazy, right? So, and that goes where things kind of can get a little off-putting. There are stories of people who thought it would be clever to ship themselves in a box to a prospect and then pop out of the box as a way to get entrance. And not only do I think that's absolutely crazy, it's actually illegal to mail a person in any way, shape, or form. And I think you have to really put yourself in the mind of the recipient. Like, how would you respond if somebody did that to you? Like, I would think that was creepy. There's another gentleman who had this idea that he wanted to influence Congress. And so he wrote all of these letters, and he flew a gyrocopter onto Capitol grounds in an attempt to deliver these letters. And, that's illegal. You're entering federal airspace. And he might have thought he was scrappy, but he wasn't scrappy, and he's actually facing a jail sentence and has been prosecuted. And that's not scrappy. That's absolutely crazy. So, again, you have to really think to yourself, is this a smart or wise gesture that's going to move forward my intention in a classy way, or is it something that's just really disruptive and really not going to be helpful long term? Yeah.
So is there a process to go through? Like if you want to accelerate things in a scrappy way, you sit down and you go through, answer these 5 questions, or some way to get you on track here, get your toe in the water?
Absolutely. And what I've tried to do in the book is just really interview people who have chosen to be scrappy on a personal level and a professional level. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that you will want to move forward your intention. Some people want to move forward an intention just as an act of curiosity, and other people want to do it from a place of conviction. So there are small efforts, there's medium efforts, and there's large efforts. Then there's also going to be occasions where you're going to do something ahead of the time, ahead of the process to get in the door, or it could be in the middle of a process where you're trying to shake things up because maybe they flatlined, or maybe you want to be scrappy after the fact so that you can say, I just made my best presentation, I just made my best play, or I just had my final interview. What can I do to just put a nice, beautiful finishing touch on that final meeting, interview, or presentation? So there are different times and different strategies towards getting scrappy. It just depends on what your intention is, how much time you have, and, what is the extent of the effort that you're trying to make. Sometimes you just need to do a small, lovely gesture, and that takes care of it. But if it's a really big play, sometimes it's going to be much more methodical. And again, if you're going to make a big play, you really want to think it through and do what we call a pre-mortem. A pre-mortem is different from a post-mortem. A pre-mortem says, all right, in a best-case scenario, what could happen? And in a worst-case scenario, what could happen? And you really try to think those things through before you execute. So hopefully, you'll kind of get an idea and a sense of it. And then we actually provide a checklist in Scrappy of all the things that you can do to make sure that your next Scrappy effort is executed beautifully with positive outcomes.
So let's take that example you just gave of, you had your interview and you want to get the job and you want to do something that's kind of scrappy to help, cement the deal. So everybody wants to do that, but where do you start thinking? Where do you begin? I mean, is a thank you note going to do anything? I mean, you don't want to hire a skywriter. I mean, How do you know where to start?
No, it's a really great question. So let's go to the simple basics. So we've all been taught through simple etiquette that you should follow up with a thank you note after an interview. There was a kid who interviewed with my company at Sjodin Communications for an internship position, and he was darling, and he sent this really sweet thank you note, but it was in handwriting, and it looked like chicken scratch, and honestly, we couldn't even read it. And so I don't think that his thank you note, although the effort and the intention was there, it wasn't a beautifully executed strategy, nor do I think it was a standout strategy. Whereas the gal that we actually ended up hiring turned out that she found out when my birthday was, and her birthday was on the exact same day. So when she came into the office, part of her interview strategy was to talk about the fact that she had done her homework, the things that she had read about my company, how she'd read the books before she came in to interview with me, and that, by the way, we actually had the same birthday. And I just thought that was clever. So, the kid who kind of follows up with the, what I would call the generic thank you note, and it's not even in nice handwriting, is going to lose to the gal who does extra homework and finds out we have the same birthday, right? So it doesn't have to be over the top, but it will make you stand out in comparison.
Right. But that's a good example of going right up to the line, because if she found out, too much more about you beyond your birthday, it could start to get creepy.
For sure, right?
So that's like going right up to the line almost, and then like if she knew all the names of your kids and when they, it's too much.
Yes, no, and there's another example in the book. I mean, we have a whole chapter dedicated to risk, rewards, and people that make mistakes. And there's a perfect example. There was a gal who was calling on Tony Coe, who is the founder of the incredible cosmetics company NYX. So NYX Cosmetics is a huge firm, and this gal was trying to call on NYX to get their business, and she was kind of going after Tony, and Tony's a scrapper. I mean, she's a scrappy gal, so she appreciated the efforts, but she really wasn't interested in this woman's proposition, so she declined gracefully. Well, the woman kept coming, and Tony declined gracefully again, and then she kept coming at her again, so much so that she actually found out that Tony had a dog and sent her dog treats for the dog. And so she was like, okay, this is getting creepy. So there's a point of no return where a no actually means no. But then there are other occasions where somebody said no a couple times and you make another lovely gesture and they say, oh my gosh, I loved your persistence and your tenacity. All right, now we're going to let you in. And the answer is you don't really know. You have to have a bit of sensitivity. And again, that's what we say. If you keep it classy and scrappy and you don't push too hard, that's really where the fine balance comes into play. And I would much rather that people make an effort and do something, some small, scrappy, classy effort to break out of the masses than to just do nothing at all out of fear. Just think it through, come up with a great plan, and do something so that you stand out from the status quo. We're in a very competitive time, and I wouldn't let the fear of going too far prevent you from doing anything at all.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of some questions to ask you, but before I do, let me just pause for a moment and remind everyone that the podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com, and that you can get a 30-day free trial and free audiobook download at audibletrial.com/SYSK, which stands for Something You Should Know. And you can choose from, they have pretty much every book you can imagine available as an audiobook, including Terri's book, Scrappy, which she narrates, and that could be your free audiobook or any other of the other books that Terri has written. You can choose from her books or thousands of others. And to get your free audiobook download and 30-day free trial, just go to audibletrial.com/SYSK. audibletrial.com/SYSK. We're talking with Terri Sjodin, and she is the author of the book Scrappy. And I wanted to ask, Terri, if you think it's a good idea to, maybe if you have an idea to be scrappy, to get someone's attention and to try again and hit that home run, that maybe you ought to run this by some friends or colleagues first to get like a objective opinion of, is this really a good idea, or is this maybe a little too wacky?
Absolutely. Beautiful point. And, one of the things that we talk about is how you should run your strategy, your idea, or your concept by your peers or a mentor or a coach or colleague. Run it by them first. And if somebody says, hey, that's a really great idea, then you feel like, okay, that's a good play. There's a beautiful story at the end of the book by a gentleman named Stephen Varela, and he was applying for a job with Wizards of the Coast. And he crafted this really elaborate plan to deliver his resume using a gaming strategy to the CEO of the company. But before he executed, he ran it by all of his friends at Disney in the Imagineering department and said, what do you guys think of this before I do it? And they all said to him, oh my gosh, Stephen, if you don't do this, we're going to be disappointed in you that you didn't do it. So go for it. So he really kind of got the go-ahead and some really lovely feedback from his peers before he executed his successful Scrappy strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice, that having that kind of confirmation that this is a good idea, this isn't going too far, this isn't, too pedestrian, that would make me do it with more confidence, knowing that somebody else weighed in and said, yeah, I think you're onto something here.
Absolutely. And he did. He said it gave him a little bit of confidence, and and everybody was rooting for him. It's really nice when you say, okay, I'm going to try this Scrappy effort. What do you guys think? They get on board, and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? How did it go? They become part of the community. And even if it doesn't fail, so what? I mean, most of the time, it's not that you're going to get a negative response. If you execute some sort of Scrappy strategy and it doesn't work, usually it just flatlines. I mean, like nothing happens, right? So you have two options. You can step forward and make an effort and move your intention forward. You can step forward into a Scrappy effort and it just flatlines and nothing happens. Or you could step too far and you could push it over the edge. You never know. But, if you think it through and you have a constructive plan, odds are you're going to fare out better than the masses. And that's really the point behind Scrappy. How do we help you to get where it is that you want to go with a classy effort in a shorter period of time? And that's really the goal.
And do you think that if the first thing you do fails, leave it alone?
Oh, heck no. I mean, and the one thing we know for sure about all of the Scrappy individuals that we profile in the book is that the first attempt didn't always didn't kind of get the job done. So then they would go for a second attempt or a third attempt. But their attempts to find a different workaround got them that much closer to achieving the goal that they wanted. And so what you'll find about these Scrappy individuals is that they all have a tendency to resonate with one another as well. So, for example, when I started interviewing Scrappy people, then they would tell me about another Scrappy friend or another Scrappy entrepreneur or another Scrappy colleague or a Scrappy coach that they had when they were in college that inspired them to take action and push a little harder. And so when you deliver a Scrappy effort to someone who's a scrapper, they see it, they notice it, they love it. So there's something about when you put forward a really beautiful effort to capture someone's attention, it really speaks volumes of the effort that you're going to bring if you are going to work with them, partner with them, work for them, get a job with them, right? It says, look, I'm not just telling you what I'm going to do. I'm showing you the way that my work ethic kind of comes through my efforts before an opportunity even happens.
So when do you know, though, to leave it alone? When do you know, okay, don't go buy dog treats for the ladies, that you're just getting too weird? When do you know it didn't work, move on, call somebody else, but this is over?
Well, I think specifically in that case, she'd said, no, you're not a good fit for our company. She didn't say, not now. She said, you're not a good fit, period. Right? There's a big difference between a not now and a no. So, again, you may be, if it's a job interview situation, maybe you didn't have the skill set. So, maybe you need to ramp up your skills. And we have a whole section that says, look, you want to make your best Scrappy play when you actually are prepared for the opportunity. So if you need stronger presentation skills, if you need stronger negotiation skills, if you need more field experience, then go get those things before you go back and make another attempt. Find out where the weakness is in your play, and then go back and make another attempt. You need to really do some self-analysis. You don't make an effort. You don't make a scrappy effort just for the sake of making a scrappy effort. It's a strategic, tactical play to move forward in intention, and there's a lot of thought that goes behind it.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, that being scrappy, the way you're talking about it, isn't to make up for the fact that you're not qualified. It only works if you are.
Right. Exactly. And so one of the interesting things that comes up is, people will say, well, I am qualified and I've been really persistent and I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. And I'll say to them, okay, well, what is it you've tried to do? Have you just keep applying online? Do you just, kind of make follow-up calls? Are you doing the generic thing that everybody else is doing? Or are you going above and beyond the ordinary in order to make things happen? And so what does above and beyond the ordinary mean? For me, it could mean a variety of different things. So, for example, maybe I find out that there's a person who I really want to meet with. So I start asking my colleagues and friends, all right, look, I really want to get to this person. Do you know them? Do you know somebody that knows them? And I'll go out of my way to find somebody who knows that individual so that I can have a proper introduction to that individual through somebody that I know. And then I can ask that person, hey, before I go meet with Bob, is there something that you can tell me about Bob that would help me to kind of smooth that first meeting? And they might say, oh, you know what? Bob is really into the band The Cure. So I might show up with a CD of the greatest hits of The Cure, and I could say, you know what, before we came in, I asked Susan if you had any personal interest. He told me that you love The Cure. I love The Cure. I don't know if you've gotten this yet, but here's the CD of their greatest hits that they just put out. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Right? So again, what kinds of little things are you doing to not only do your research, do your homework, find a workaround, get an introduction, and then when you have that moment, then you want to be able to deliver with savvy and elegance and beautiful timing.
Terrific. Well, that's really interesting, and there have been other books and other people talking about going the extra mile, doing that special thing, but this is a different take on it that's maybe a little more organic and a little more, I don't know, meaty. I like it. It's great.
Thanks. Well, we all have to get scrappy. Sometimes we're just trying to earn the right to be heard, or we want to gain access to a person who can help us, or maybe you're trying to rebound after a disappointment. Maybe you're trying to land a job or get a promotion or close a deal or get a second chance, right? So when you make a scrappy effort, especially if you're trying to get a second chance at something, when it works, it's almost redemptive, right? Like, oh my gosh, nothing was happening and I got a little scrappy and it worked, and it's like, woo, it's redemptive. It's celebratory. It changes the game. It's the basis at the core of it. It's why we love all the great movies like The Karate Kid or even, Yoda helping Luke Skywalker or Mr. Miyagi helping Daniel-san in The Karate Kid. Like, there's something about that underdog doing an organic, beautifully executed, scrappy effort and winning. I mean, who doesn't love that story?
Right.
This is your story, right? It's your life story. No one's going to fish us out of, a bucket of the average or status quo and give us our dreams. We have to find workarounds to make our dreams happen. And I think that what you'll find when you read Scrappy is that it's a book of extraordinary, ordinary people who have done absolutely fascinating things that are real and normal and not bizarre, that you can learn from to execute on your next vision, dream, goal, or idea. And I think that that's why it's so fun, and it will really get you thinking.
Great. Well, terrific. Thanks, Terri.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Terri Sjodin is the author of the book Scrappy. There is a link to the book on Amazon on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. And also, don't forget, her book is also available as an audiobook at audibletrial.com/SYSK, and Terri narrates her own book. So If that's the book you'd like to have for free with your Audible trial, that would be the one to have. And finally today, you've probably heard that washing your hands frequently is the best way to prevent getting or spreading illness. And with cold and flu season coming up, it's always good to wash your hands frequently. And everybody knows that. But here are some interesting facts. 80% of all infectious diseases are spread by touch. The Center for Disease Control recommends that you wash your hands. When you do, wash them for at least 15 seconds. However, studies have shown that the reduction of skin bacteria is nearly 10 times greater if you will just keep washing for 30 seconds rather than stopping at 15 seconds. 95% of the population, this is interesting, 95% of the population says that they wash their hands after they use a public toilet. However, when 8,000 people were monitored, somebody went in the bathroom to watch, across 5 large cities in the U.S., they found that the actual number of people who wash their hands after they use a public restroom is more like 67%. When people wash their hands, the most commonly missed areas are the fingertips and fingernails. Hot and warm water is no more effective than cold water when you wash your hands. It just doesn't make any difference at all. It's how long you wash your hands. And finally, ask your doctor to wash his hands. A poll of pediatric ICU physicians showed that they claimed their rate of hand washing between patients was 73%. But when somebody actually followed and observed, the hand washing rate between seeing patients was less than 10%. So always make sure your doctor washes his hands. And I've heard several people say that, it's okay to ask. The doctor won't be offended. It can't hurt to ask, because if he touched somebody before he saw you that has some weird disease, you don't want to get that. And that is something you should know. The podcast today has been sponsored by Audible.com. If you'd like a free 30-day trial to Audible.com and get a free audiobook download, just go to audibletrial.com/SYSK. That's audibletrial.com/SYSK. And a reminder, if you have a moment, to head over to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to the Something You Should Know podcast and leave a rating and review. I would really appreciate that. And I thank you for listening today to Something You Should Know.